Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the MSP Cyber Roundtable. Today we have Henry Timm and Don Sizer, who both respectively are in the service provider community with all of you, but also are leaders with the Tech Degenerates community. And you guys are somewhat of a bridge between the service provider market and the vendor space, I understand. And we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But how you guys dealing with this heat? Where are you in the world?
So it broke where we are. We're down into the 80s today. I think we're 85 and sunny at the moment, so it's not horrific.
Beautiful.
It's the first day that I've been able to straighten my hair. How's that?
Yeah, no, that's I just left Texas yesterday and came back to Indiana, and greatly appreciate that it's a good 30 degrees cooler here than it
30. Wow. Yeah. Good for you. So wait, how long were you in Texas?
About a week.
Oh, so you were like in like burning hellscape for a week. Solid.
Yeah, there wasn't much time spent outside during daylight hours, that's for sure.
Yeah, I just got off the phone with one of my Texas friends, and he's like, "Yeah, I don't go outside. It's chill in this house."
For sure.
All right, so we have. I would love to do some little service provider stories, like the little miniature version of Henry or Don, whoever wants to volunteer to go first. How'd you guys end up in this industry? How did you end up leading, service delivery practices? Like, did you fall into it? Was it an intention? Are you comfortable there now? Like, what's it been like?
Take it.
Okay, so I started out not in this industry at all. Actually, I was in naval architectural engineering and kind of fell into it, mostly so I could turn my homework in properly. I had to learn how to fix things. Everything was broken forever, so you go to turn your homework in and like the plotter was broken or whatever. So learned how to fix those types of things because printers, they haven't changed over the last year or two. It's only been that long. So started out from there, and then worked for huge global organizations down to small mom and pop shops. And eventually one day I just got tired of working for somebody else, literally rage quit, and started a company the next day. And here we are.
Wow. Well, you make that sound like it was an instant decision, but I imagine there must have been some thought about starting a new company before the rage quit, or was this really like?
No, it was legit. Like, nope, I'm done. I'm out. That's it. I'm pretty sure I can do this better than he could. So
were you thinking that at that moment, or was it like you woke up in the morning and you said, "Now what"?
No, it literally happened during that day. There were comments made, things said, that sort of thing that were not politically correct or legal anymore. It was things that would have gotten you canceled. And I was like, I'm done. I'm done here. I'm not doing this anymore.
I'm glad you were able to harness that. It sounds like deserved exit opportunity. And
yes.
You deserved to leave is what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
Or they deserved to lose you.
There was no forethought. There was no nothing. So it was one of those, like, both my husband and I worked at the same organization at the time. So it was two people that had mortgage payments and everything else. We quit, started a business the next day, and didn't have the opportunity to fail. So we made it work.
I was one of those guys that fell into it. It's interesting for me to contrast my situation, which was I was like in my early 20s and I just didn't want to work anymore. I'd been working a corporate gig for a few years. I wanted to take some time to do something fun, and people kept offering me work, and I just eventually, didn't say no. And I think that people happen into this industry, but you've got some real intentionality there to like just jump in and
there was some intention.
Henry, well, wait. Let's. So that's the beginning. Then what? A long, illustrious, like fun, like.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. So no, it's been being able to work with my spouse every day for the last 20 years has been amazing. I can't, say bad things about that because it has been. It's been a fun ride. He's a great guy, and
Well, and
we
we're
have
on
an
air.
amazing team. Well, there's that, but but no, I think we've built a really good practice over the last 20 years, and it's only been, to be fair, in the last 5 to 7 years that we decided to really grow, and we've done that successfully. So
Well, yeah, you'll have to tell us more. We could save it for later, but I would love to hear more about like what's
over a
different in the
drink
last 5
sometime.
years.
Yeah, yeah.
Henry, how'd you land?
So I'm convinced that at least I don't know that I've met anyone in the space that's really like started off at this was their plan A. Um, I am a college dropout and was initially going pre-med and thought I was going to go off and work in emergency room forever. And I did for a while, but I fell into that this was just kind of a passion and had a knack for it and was offered a nice job as a network admin and then eventually as a CIO for an organization, and kind of sat on the other side of the desk there for a while, being, kind of that in-house person that MSPs would approach and vendors would approach, and realized that I really didn't like the way things were being done and thought it could be done better. So I left that job and started this, and was like, oh yes, people will actually pay me money to do this. This is fantastic. And kind of tried to find a new and better approach to things from the sales side, and more consultative approach, rather than just hawking products, which seem to have resonate. But would say that over the last 14 years of the business, absolutely kind of gone through our learning experiences, and it's not been all rosy and sunshine, but kind of stumbled upwards and keep relying on awesome members in the community to kind of keep lifting us up and growing.
So you mentioned hawking products. Was that past tense? You don't think
Yes.
of yourself that way anymore?
No, I don't. I don't believe that anyone should be leading with the product. It needs to be a conversation about finding that solution and what, if there even needs to be a solution to it. It should be that initial conversation,
Right.
fact finding first.
Yeah, and we always, in my practice, my job is to support partners, and sometimes people come in and they're like, okay, what's the price list? How do I sell you to my customer? And I say, whoa, slow down. You shouldn't be selling us to your customer.
Yeah,
you guys are the product. We're going to help you, and so I think that I don't know at what moment in your trajectory that if that dawned on you suddenly, or if that was a sunrise that happened slowly, but.
I would say it was earlier on in starting the MSP, because it was kind of a catalyst for starting the MSP, was wanting to see that more consultative business outcome approach, as opposed to, I vividly remember someone selling ERP solutions to me just because they had to meet their quota. Not the way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I get calls from an unnamed cloud-based CRM vendor weekly, or despite the fact that I tell, or not ERP solution, despite the fact I tell them I'm never going to buy an ERP. We're not in that business.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we're here. We're going to talk Trustmark in a little while, but before we jump into that, we're about to do a quick lecture. Vulnerability Management 101 is the topic today. With that, I'm going to jump in. So we're doing the miniature version of a much longer lecture I have on building out a vulnerability management as a service practice for partners. But I think the most important part of vulnerability management is it's the value that you create as a provider. And when you sell that to the customer, it's really important to communicate what they are buying. And what they are buying is not a scanner that goes in a stack. So It is the act that you are managing their vulnerabilities. It's a thing people do. Um, you need software to help, right? But it's a process. So um, I'm going to go through some terminology, some concepts, high level. Hopefully, people watching can take this into their practices. So on the glossary side, I want to just touch on words like threat, exploit, and vulnerability, which are sometimes used interchangeably. But as the security advisor, the security expert, you should always endeavor to use the precise term so that when your customer hears what you're saying, it's consistent, but also so that they can understand, so they can be informed when they're seeing needs, right? They can associate those needs with what your value offering is. So when we talk about a threat, while again, sometimes people use these terms interchangeable, we're talking about the actor that creates a loss. So this could be evil dorm room hacker. This could be the Lazarus group in North Korea. This could be lightning burning down a building. Or in the case of something that happened at a famous EDR vendor this week, a human error, right? So that's the threat. Exploit is the action that threat actor uses. So it's the tool, it's the pathway that they take to impact that loss. Vulnerability is that place in your security architecture that the exploit can pass through. Now, I think that we've all heard these terms before about a vulnerability as a weakness in software. An exploit is sometimes thought of as a piece of code, right, that inserts like a key into a lock into a vulnerability. But more generally, it really is a verb. Those exploits, it's the act of getting into that vulnerability. It's not always a piece of code, right? So I can exploit my file cabinet, with a pair of lockpicks, right? Um, and then, of course, the asset and the loss. And I think uh, sometimes, particularly people in financial services, don't always understand what we're talking about when we say the word asset. But we're talking about anything of value in the information architecture of a customer organization, which frequently is things like laptops and servers and like machines, right? It could be phones. It could be, again, a file cabinet, right? It could be a person, right? And then a loss is usually a monetary amount, oftentimes theoretical, sometimes actual damage that happens to that asset. So that's the vocab 101. I'm curious, guys, in your practice, do you see people get confused by these? I mean, these are terms that insurers like toss at end clients, right? Um, do you see this is something that people can grab onto when they're being communicated value about what your protection is trying to do?
I think cyber insurance has really paved the way for a lot of these discussions with our end clients, whether that's a co-managed or fully managed client. But it's made it a financial responsibility on their part to be part of that and educated at least at a basic level on a lot of this. So it's becoming a lot easier than it has been the last few years.
Yeah, they've certainly been working to um, get people to understand how to get insured, right? And that because that's becoming harder, right? They need to educate their audiences. It's good for us, right? And of course, what service providers do is also good for the insurer. It protects their potential losses. So anyway, that with that glossary, we can now put together a picture of an attack chain, right? So a threat exploits a vulnerability in an asset. I think we've heard of that before. What some people sometimes, while they may have heard about it, don't think about too often is your assets are all over your network, but the asset that is initially exploited by an attacker is not frequently the asset that's actually the one that's subject to a loss. Um, and an attacker breaks into one system through an account, through an open software misconfiguration, through a system that's unpatched, and then they move around, right? They escalate their privileges vertically and they move around laterally or horizontally through a network until they find something that they can capture some value, right? And then so there's this chain, right, across an organization. which is sometimes difficult to envisage. But thanks to the Rubik's Cube there, you can see what an attack chain might look like. And if you break that attack chain someplace in the middle, you can stop the attacker from moving across the network. So this isn't just always about protecting the surface of a network or protecting the way an attacker breaks in. It's about making it difficult for an attacker to move vertically or horizontally. So in any case, your security surface is everywhere, right? It's not like the firewall or the outside of the network. It's really anything that can communicate with the outside world, which is just about everything, right? It's anything that reads email, anything with a web browser, anything that is pulling information down from the internet. It's pretty much everywhere. So the attackers can break in anywhere, and then they can move anywhere. And so to perform vulnerability management in an effective way, you really need to secure everywhere. You can't just look at the outside of a network. And then, of course, once you find those vulnerabilities, and this is where everything before that is stuff software can do. Find the vulnerabilities, maybe even map the network, maybe do some automated patching. But then once you have that list of vulnerabilities, this is where the humans come in, because the reality is things don't always patch themselves, right? Automatic patch management could be broken. Automated patch management may not have the patches that you need to solve that vulnerability. It may be unpatchable, and there may be something unpatchable or unfixable because the patch is either not out yet or that vendor's gone, doesn't exist anymore. That asset just needs to be retired because that thing's never going to get fixed. So a human has to get involved and make a decision, make a management decision, and either fix it or work with the end customer to accept the risk. Although it is reasonable for an end customer to accept an amount of risk, and this is where vulnerability prioritization can come into play, where you say, hey, if it's below this, we're not going to fix that. That's an accepted risk. If it's above this, we're going to do something like fix it or deploy a compensating control. And as an example, I'm aware of a car dealership, and they have dealership computers. And one of the things that happens at a car dealership is you don't get to choose the software you run because you sell cars. It's part of your franchise license. And that car OEM hands you your franchise software, and you just got to run it. And if that franchise software is working on an ancient version of Java, right, you may have to figure out, okay, what do I do about this thing that I can't fix? I don't really want to accept the risk because it's like a horrible hole in my security. What do I do with that? And then you'll have to put a compensating control in place. Like as an example, maybe you stick that application and you virtualize it, right? So in any case, as providers, this process that I'm describing, that is the thing you should be packaging up and selling to your customer. And best practice these days is to set an SLA, draw a box around that, and charge your customer for that service. This is an ongoing service. This is not a thing you do once or best effort. This is a thing where you contract with the customer to hold the level of risk acceptance at a line in the sand, and they accept everything that's lower risk, and everything above that you're on contract to resolve. And people will pay for this, and they'll pay a lot more than they will for vulnerability scans because insurers are demanding it. So anyway, that's the 101 of vulnerability management. I happen to have some service providers on today. So are you guys seeing increasing demand for this in your client base?
In different ways. It's not just, they're not using the words, right? Because they don't know the words to necessarily use. So it's a little bit different. We have one gentleman that his whole world right now revolves around CVEs and what that looks like and who touches what and what are we, fixing on the daily and where's our severity level that we care about, and is it 1, is it 2, is it, it all depends on what the scenario is and who the client is and what it touches.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have a topic of the day today, which I'm sort of excited about because the Trustmark is my jam. And I'm so excited that you guys have joined the program, not individually as a service provider, which, and just a backstory here, Fort Mesa is a platform partner with CompTIA, and we're supporting Cybersecurity Trustmark Readiness, CompTIA Cybersecurity Trustmark. And this is a badge of honor to designate service providers that are up to snuff in the service provider industry. It's part of CompTIA's effort to professionalize and set a quality bar. And over the last year, we've gotten a couple hundred providers engaged in coming up to this bar. Many of them have already reached that bar. And they're already in their second year of the program, so they've already been assured. And many other partners are all over the racetrack. It's a stiff security requirement to say that you're at a level of excellence. And so what I'm so excited about is that we're now. I mean, the Tech Degenerates as a group. You were one of the first organizations that from outside CompTIA said, "Hey, you know what? We want the people in our community to be able to achieve this." So I'm curious what led up to that decision. And then, of course, please offer your observations of how people are doing and what's that experience been like.
So I ended up talking with Wayne from CompTIA, and was like, tell me more about this thing. What are you trying to accomplish? What does this look like? And he kind of said exactly the same thing that you did. It's the idea of that bar of excellence that we're trying to set, and we're trying to do it as an industry, as opposed to letting an outside group um, enforce regulation upon us that may not be appropriate for our industry. The government, while it governs, it doesn't necessarily regulate very well, especially in industries that it doesn't really do business in. So having something available to us that makes sense, that we're all aware of, that's using pieces of things that people understand on a global level, like CIS, like ISO, like those types of regulations. I think it makes perfect sense. There's some pieces in there that I'm a little like, I'm not sure why that's there in Trustmark, but I get what they're going for. So it started out as a really good conversation with Wayne from CompTIA that led to a conversation with Henry, and we both said this is probably something that we should do in the community. And I said, you know what, I'm going to do the Trustmark, so I am more than happy to lead that working group, and it kind of went from there.
Yeah, I think it works out really well because some of our core values under the community for the Tech Degenerates align very much with what the objective and goal is around the Trustmark. So we're really looking for ways that we can cheerlead others in the community to improve themselves and kind of raise the bar for the industry in general.
And if we can do it together, then we're all about that. Because quite frankly, working through anything like this is miserable. But when you can commiserate with other people, it makes it better. Not only that, but you're doing what you need to do the needful for that particular control. But you're hearing how somebody else is going about it as well. And I think that helps solve some of the what should I do, what should I not do, can I get away with this? How should this look? What is the language that we're using? So there's a really good sounding board in there as well for how to satisfy a control.
Now, there's a lot at stake here, right, guys? I mean, I know we talked about professionalizing, raising that bar of excellence, setting that standard so that it's not imposed on us. But if we don't do this well, first of all, let me just say, if CompTIA doesn't succeed here, right? And by the way, I mean, the adoption's been great so far, right? We've never seen an industry effort in our segment move like this around professionalization and setting that bar before. And so what they've been able to achieve in the last year is really pretty incredible. But let's say that CompTIA vaporized tomorrow, right, as a brand, right? There's not other industry-wide IT associations that are really ready to step in here, right? There's other industries that would love to exert control over us, right? I'm sure the AICPA would be happy to say, as accountants, we'll be happy to be responsible for the IT sector as well, right? And we're feeling that pressure with SOC too, right? And many of us are under pressures from CMMC, right? In the government, the GovCon community. But just think about, as every industry in the world sees its cyber compliance standard imposed on us as a service provider that works cross sector, cross vertical. If we don't set a bar for ourselves, we could end up having to play to like 20 different tunes. Just
Especially
not
because
just
it may come from uneducated lawyers or government officials that don't understand the situation or a practical day to day, and unfortunately still will legislate if they feel that they need to.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
and
there's some. Yeah, go ahead, Don.
I think there's a point too when legislation gets involved and people that don't work in the industry get involved, you have that scenario where they want to impose things on you that may actually drive you out of business because the cost is so great that it is very difficult for the average small business to do. So letting us do it on our do it our own selves, essentially, what it boils down to,
Yeah.
keeps some of the smaller businesses in play, and I think that's really important in the United States to have that small business.
Yeah, and it's not just the governments and regulators we need to be afraid of, right? Because we have I just mentioned the AICPA, and they have their SOC 2 standard, right? We have PCI DSS with their PCI standard. We have the high trust community with that healthcare standard, right? And these are, to some extent, we have the CMMC ABL, that's quasi public private. Um, we have non-government organizations out there forming to develop security standards for their industry segments. They're not governments, right? But they'd also be happy to um, put constraints on us, and in ways that are good for their business model, right?
Yeah.
Not for our business model. So
Correct.
that's it's the reason why we chose to jump on the train with CompTIA, and I'm glad that you guys are seeing the same thing. So you guys are on the train now. Your group has been working together for a couple months now. When did you guys start?
Oh, geez, April-ish, I think.
April.
As far as
Okay.
the Trustmark working group stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 3 months, which is, it sounds like, depending on how you look at this, either not very long or a long time, right? Um,
Depends on the day.
but you've been in there for a few months. Presumably, you guys have met more than once. There's a lot of areas that need to be touched here around understanding what security is in place, starting to document and collecting evidence on current practices, and then, of course, developing governance. And a lot of this is, I mean, I know in my partner community, people may have been into IT for 20 years, but they've never had to run their own governance process before. They may have supported customers in their governance process, but it's really different running your own,
Oh, it's
right?
so
And so
much easier
that's,
to do it for a client than it is for yourself.
yeah.
Here's
I
something you
agree.
need to do. Here's a policy. You go enforce that. You
Is
got
it,
this.
isn't that strange how that works? So you guys are in there and you're eating this stuff and getting the indigestion. Are you feeling? How do you feel about your speed?
You can only go as fast as is possible in your own organization, right? Because if you go too fast just to get something done, one, either you're not going to get the evidence that you need, or it's going to be sloppy, you're going to have to redo it, and or you've written a policy or a procedure or something that isn't quite right. So you're just going to make more work for yourself. So I'm okay with going at it a little bit slower than I would maybe like to, so that it's correct.
Yeah,
I
no, I would absolutely agree with that. Is it's going to have to be a case by case, and use yourself as the benchmark on what you're comfortable with, and not necessarily look at others. I think I've heard the variation of people that have gone through it is what I think the quickest was 4 months, and it's gone up to 2 years for some people that still are working on it. So, I mean, that's a wide variety there.
So, I mean, because there's a wide variety of providers out there. I mean,
Yeah.
we have people that do ISO 27K every year, and they've been doing it a long time, and they literally already have the evidence and governance documents, and they just have to like click upload. And we have people that have been doing the same thing in SOC 2. And I'll get off my SOC 2 badgering stump for a moment, but anyway, we have providers that are have been doing that internally, right? And then we have providers that have never done it before. And for the people who've never done it before, the goal really, right? The destination is you've got your trust mark, right? But the goal for them is actually even more powerful because the journey, right, is going to force creating a robust security program, right? It's going to force you to question your own governance. It's going to force you to question your own practice. Maybe it'll force you to question some tool selection. Although
It's forced me to question a lot of things, Matthew.
your life choices, your life, yeah. So I think that those questions are all like part of the goal, and the fact that you're taking this slow to do it right, what that says to me is that it's working.
Well, and
So
you end up identifying a couple gaps, right? That you either knew you had, and now all of a sudden they're glaring, or you thought you had, but didn't have to deal with.
Yeah. That's identifying things where you thought that you had a control fully dealt with, and upon inspection and proof,
Not so
you,
much.
yeah, you're at best partial.
we're not talking about asset management, are we?
We're just not going to talk about asset management.
Yeah. So, were there any surprises? Were there things in there that you were like, "What is this doing in a security book?"
Oh, the electrical pieces, yes. So there's some it's part of an ISO piece, and I don't know the exact control, but it's all about how your electrical is run in your building. I was like, okay. I mean, I get where they were going with it. It's a whole lot of like, if you don't have electric, what then what? That sort of thing. But that one, I don't know that one, I don't personally care. Like either we have electric or we don't. I don't really need to worry about.
I think having a plan for it is like what they're trying to get at. It's not necessarily that you've designed your electric in a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had that conversation with Wayne. It was like, what is this? Like, and I think that was literally the conversation I had. And he explained it the same way. Like, what is the plan? Write a plan around this. If you don't have electric, if it goes out, if you're, on a long piece, like, they just had that incident in Texas. People were out of electricity for, was that a week, 2 weeks? It was insanely long for as hot as it was. Then what? And I
Yeah.
totally understand that. Like I can get that.
Yeah.
Well,
To your point, it's made us kind of looking through the various controls. It's made us kind of reevaluate and add to our IR plan internally, because there's things that we just kind of assumed or took for granted, that there's some thought-provoking controls in here.
when I was taking my security credential, the CISSP test, I remember a specific question around the position. I don't even remember what the answer is, but they asked about where the lights are supposed to be positioned at a guard booth under like a certain situation, right?
Was it on the wall? Because that's where I would put them.
Like they describe, and of course it's in words, they describe like the whole layout, and you have to like take that sentence and turn it into like a 3-dimensional thing in your head, and then be like, okay, where would I put the lights? Yeah, I think there's a lot of if we're not forced to confront the things that we don't tend to think about, right, then there are areas of security that are probably unattended, right? And most of us got into this segment because we were super geeky, and we love doing the super geeky things, which means that in general we're not so good or don't give so much attention to the things that are a little less geeky. So I don't know if that electrical thing, the power going out, you're probably just thinking like, oh, good, I have a day off. But
But it affects everything else, right? If you have a data center, it affects that. If you have, all kinds of different things.
What else? So you guys have been meeting as a group, and did you start as a class together, or have people been sort of joining over the last 3 months?
It's literally a drop-in to come and go as you please. So that works out pretty well. People drop in, they hang out, and it's not even people that are all doing Trustmark. So it's been really interesting. People that are versed in CIS, people that are versed in CMMC, people that are versed in, ISO, they are all dropping in and giving out advice and things along those lines. So I think it's been extremely helpful as far as that goes.
Yeah, I think it's good for people that are Trustmark curious as well to hop in and see, that it's not necessarily such a big scary monster, that there are other people that are going to be willing to open up and be transparent about their own processes and kind of the tribulations of going through the process. So I think that it's probably accelerated that for some people that might have been on the edge of whether or not they should partake in the Trustmark yet. Knowing that there's other people that they can reach out to and work through it with.
Now, you guys have providers. Are most of your providers in North America in your group? Are they all over the place?
It's a mixture. I would say primarily North America, but we do have Europe is pretty well represented. I know I've seen some Australia and Asian represented as well, but primarily we are North American based with them.
So here's the question then: Are you finding that people generally have already heard about the Trustmark? They're hearing it from you for the first time. How are they? They're hearing about it before they learn that you guys are doing a group, or they heard about the group first, and then any ideas about that?
I think it's a mixture of both. Some of it was tell me more about this Trustmark thing, because I haven't heard about this. What is this? And a couple of the smaller MSPs especially were like, well, that doesn't apply to me, or I don't have the resources, or like, no, you actually do. It's not that terrible. Like, it can be done. In fact, for a smaller MSP, it might be easier.
It's definitely easier at a smaller MSP.
Right? I mean, less moving parts to deal with. Like, you definitely have the availability to do it. It's just more a matter of like, do you have the manpower to do it? And go ahead.
Less moving parts, but not just less moving parts. And I may be spilling some secret beans in public here, but like the assessors are going to give you different recommendations, different feedback if you're a one-person shop not working in GovCon than if you're a medium to large MSP and you've got all these critical infrastructure compliance requirements. You're going to get different feedback because the amount of reasonable security is different, right? So not being an assessor, right? I can't. I'm not an assessor for the CompTIA Trustmark, but I understand that's what's likely, and so yeah, things are easier when you're a one person shop because, as an example, separation of duties doesn't exist, right?
Correct. You just take one hat off, you put the other one on. Like, that's how you separate the duties at that point.
Well, I would love to hear a little bit more about the Tech Degenerates. I heard about you guys. No, sorry. I didn't hear about you guys. I had a piece of branding collateral dropped in my face, which Donna, you probably don't remember that. But
that was totally me, yeah.
And I was like, "What is this thing?" Which is it's a fun brand. But tell me about the mission.
I'm gonna let Henry do that one.
So we started as a group of MSPs and vendors that were looking for a way to keep up our conversations from events and kind of share resources and tools. And that group chat kind of escalated and grew into something, this community now that is really focused on kind of those core principles of how do we elevate each other to do better on all sides of the channel? How do we kind of collaborate in those meaningful ways, in a empathetic way, and truly build something and do something that makes everyone do a little bit better and grow.
So you've got that group. It sounds like supporting the group in the Trustmark is in alignment with that. In some ways, somewhat like a peer group. But it's really interesting that you bring the vendors together with the service providers into the same communities. That's oftentimes us vendor people all hang out with vendor people, right? And you providers have your own club.
I
But
mean, that's fair, but I don't think we can get better as an industry without being inclusive of everyone. And what we have found is that the vendors that are truly interested in making it better for not only themselves but for the solution providers as well have hopped on board and have shared generously with the community. And you can't really ask for more than that.
No, it sounds like we need more of that, really.
Yes.
I think it's great conversations that happen too. That a new and emerging vendor may not know how to go to market, and they've gotten some really good feedback from more established other vendors in the space, or from MSP saying, don't go about it this way, approach us this way. Kind of those do's and don'ts.
So that's the community. You guys are your trust group. So this is Discord, right? That should we talk about that? So this is the reason I want to bring it up is this Trustmark support. Is this like a standing moment in time in a week, or is this a channel inside Discord? Like, how does this work?
So it's both. So we have a channel inside of Discord where you can ask random questions should you need to, but it's also it's a Thursday afternoon weekly meeting drop in. Yeah.
Okay. So people are dropping in throughout the week, but then during that designated time on Thursday, do you guys have a scoreboard? How do you know who's leading the pack?
We don't do that. We probably should, but we don't because it all depends, right? Because we're not working at the same pace, and we're not working on the same controls, and we're not working on the exact same things every time. So it'd be hard to score that per se.
Oh yeah, I mean it's like everyone's on a different racetrack, right?
Exactly.
But I'm curious. I mean, it's going to be a real cheerleading moment, right? When maybe you've got some people that are close to being assessment ready, or it's in sight. Do you know when that would be?
I'm close. I wouldn't say. I mean, I want to take another pass back through it, but I probably won't be ready till the end of the year. But out of the 100 and some controls that are there, we are. Last I counted, we were number 79 was done. So
that's
awesome.
That's really impressive, actually. So just to put this in context, 3 months in, if you're spending a couple hours a week at this, that sounds like the right amount of progress, presuming you had all of the security you needed and you already had it all in place, right?
But we didn't. That's just it. I mean,
you actually had to build this out.
Well, you had to go check, right?
Yeah.
So when you're like, well, do we have X, Y, and Z? And they're like, well, we have X and Y, Z, maybe not so much, right? So it's that conversation that you have to keep having internally of show me exactly how we're doing this, because this is my understanding. And then, when your team shows you exactly how we're doing, X, Y, Z, we're like, okay, well, we need to adjust this a little bit so it looks exactly like this because that's the way the control is written.
So that's a real zero to hero accelerator. Henry, I hope you're doing somewhere in the realm of like ballpark of like that direction. You feeling good?
We're not quite as far along as Dawn is, because Dawn and her team are just rock stars, but we're making decent progress, and I think we'll probably not be. I think we'll get across that finish line before the a year from start. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot to tackle there, and a lot of things that just kind of make you reevaluate and kind of reassess the tools and processes and procedures you have in place. And I think that's kind of more of a kicker for everything is looking at those policies.
Well, for both of you, that sounds like, and I don't know, people watching may not understand how much of a success story this is, because if you look at industry guidance, you crack a textbook, or you even look at the guidance from CIS, which the Trustmark is largely based on this CIS safeguard roadmap. The guidance is that this is a 2-year journey, actually. So to put something like this, to put a strong information architecture in place, IG3 on CIS, and the Trustmark exceeds IG3. So that's typically a 2-year journey. I think it sounds like both of you are on track for this to be half of that. So I can't wait. I can't wait for that to be proven out as a success.
Well, and I think, to be fair, we both had very security focused organizations to start with. So while we were doing the thing, we weren't necessarily doing it to the exact letter, and then just didn't have the policy and procedure around it. Because then you go back and you look at things like, okay, well, we've been doing the thing, but we don't have the procedure documented, or the procedure's not quite right, or whatever. So then you take that step back to take the 2 steps forward again. So it's always 1 step back, right, before you go forward again. But that's okay, because you're fixing things as you go.
All right, so you guys are, the 2 of you are Trustmark in progress, and at some point you'll be Trustmark assured, and that will be an interesting value for you to share with your target customers. So that's I'm really psyched about that. Talk to me about what else. Is there other things that you guys would like to share about other initiatives that Tech Degenerates is working on?
There are so many things that we are working on.
All right. You have 13 minutes.
Okay. So let's start with the things that are up and coming, right? Because we'll be at ChannelCon. I think that's the important thing to start with, right? The booth will be there, we will be there, fun things will be there. I'm sure costumes will be a part of it, because we can't not. And for those of you that are wondering why we show up to conferences and we do costumes and things along those lines, and you're like, oh, that's kind of silly. You're like, yeah, it's kind of silly, but it's a ton of fun, quite frankly. We all go to these conferences and we listen to pitch and we listen to dry material all day long, and to be able to let loose a little bit, be a little silly, throw a costume on. We're all infallible. We all like to have a little bit of fun, and I think that kind of brings it out of everybody. So if you want to join in, let us know. We'll let you know what the costumes are.
Yeah, I think along those lines, obviously, we'd love for people to kind of join the discussion with us on the Discord, because there's all types of things. Obviously, latest cybersecurity news and outages and so forth are constantly going across. But there's other discussions from personal to business that are happening in there as well. And obviously, if you have time, we'd love to have you join one of the those weekly open office hours to hop in, hop out, and just come learn about Trustmark if you haven't started the journey yet.
So you guys are going to be at ChannelCon. I'm psyched about you supporting the Trustmark initiative with us. What else? You guys? What else is happening this year? Anything else?
So there's a rumor. I don't know if it's true or not, but there's a rumor that there might be some live streams coming.
Yep. Yep. There'll be some live streams. There'll be, of course, we do a monthly happy hour call as well. That is always kind of fun, and we're reminiscent of sitting around the hotel bar at an event, and it's just kind of open, no sales pitch, just hanging with vendors, MSPs, and there's a few non-channel people, IT admins that pop in as well and want to hang out. We've also been working on kind of furthering education as far as creating some content for the industry to help drive some things forward. We've been working on some tools and resources, and kind of a consulting and enablement arm as well for both MSPs and vendors.
So people who jump into your Discord community, they really get access to. I not having participated at any great deal of depth, it's hard for me to classify it, but I would say I could compare this to some of the other peer group communities out there, right? Um, Except this seems like it seems like a little bit more open, right? A little bit more freeform. Um, Tell me how we would contrast this with like the typical peer group that meets like once a month and sits on a 2 hour call, and there's the same 12 guys that have been there for like 2 years. Like, how is this different than that?
The information flow is very different. To give you an idea, even a lot of the cybersecurity things that are happening in the world, typically they'll hit the Discord before they hit the news. They hit the Discord before they hit a lot of the CVEs. Like, it's there faster because the people that are actually working on the incidents are in that Discord. So we find that it's a great place for news, for one. But some of the other information that we get, because we do have people that aren't in the channel specifically, we get that CIO perspective on some things, or the CISO perspective from some folks, which I think that's really interesting, both for as an MSP that wants to do business with some of those folks, but also the way that they think and the constraints that they have too in the businesses that they have. So there's a lot of interesting information that goes on. So you don't get that in a typical peer group, and you also don't get from the vendor side of things. How does the vendor side work? How does it look like? How do we look to you? What does that look like? How do we get resources appropriately from our vendors, that sort of thing. And it's a better way of dealing with them for the most part. It's a more relational way of doing it than transactional.
I think the conversations in general are different because everyone's approaching it under this lens that we all are not perfect, that we all have a lot to learn from each other, both sides of the channel there, and that our approach to everything, to our businesses, to the solutions, to the business problems that we're solving for our clients is all a little bit different. And so it's kind of a more authentic discussion that happens, more transparent, I think. And there's also a little shift in mentality about kind of equalizing the playing field for everyone. So we don't allow direct sales in the Discord. There's a place for vendors to be able to share what news they have about their products and events that they have coming up. But in general, sales is kind of taken out of the equation of the initial discussion for most of the channels. So I think that really is kind of a paradigm shift for vendors who are there typically really actually want to provide value outside of just selling you a product then. And MSPs that are there, you're typically finding a more mature MSP that wants to be there because they've been to enough places to be pitched at, and they enjoy having kind of a breath of fresh air when it comes to that.
One of the other interesting pieces that I have found a couple of times that I have asked for help, I have gotten responses almost instantaneously, and it's been from small to large MSPs as well as vendors. So that's been truly interesting. And the people that have just immediately said, I can help you. Here's what this looks like. Here's the answer to the question. Here's how we solve this problem. Let me know if you need anything else. So that's, quite frankly, it's more than anybody could ask for.
That that value you're talking about, that space with the vendors, but not to be vendored at. That I'm going to get on my stomach. So I'm in vendor space, right? But I think I've been the recipient of a lot of targeted marketing. I think we all have. I think that there's a pendulum shift happening right now where 30 years ago, business development was all about relationship building, right? What are the relationships that you could build? Those could turn into business opportunities. And then we just went through 30 years of digital disruption, right? Which resulted in junk mail we can't open, both physical and in the virtual world, right? Because there's just too much of it. We can't answer the phone anymore, right? We can't even trust our text messages anymore. So as community members, we're looking for places to be safe from that. But as vendors, I think that there's a whole vendor community that, frankly, we've had a whole generation of, we've had a 30-year track record history, right, of vendors doing more and more of that outbound marketing, right, and that direct marketing. And that the pendulum is shifting back the other direction towards, well, how do I give to the community, right? How do I create those relationships? And I'm happy to see that you've got a clutch of vendors there that are on that train.
There's
Right?
just a really nice handful that have not only accepted that, but embraced it instead of, nope, this is the way we've always done it, and this is how we get our numbers. With
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it works that way anymore, but certainly there's people that think it works that way.
correct.
Yeah.
I can't remember the last time I bought something from someone because they cold called me. But it still happens every day, right?
Also with a free order of steak knives, right?
They'll
All
send
right,
you a
guys.
Yeti cup. That's fine.
Sometimes it's nice getting this stuff in person, right? So we're almost at the top of the hour here. We didn't offer you guys a lot of new information today, although we did go over VM 101. I'm curious if you have takeaways for our viewer community on real quick. What have you learned in this Trustmark process that you want people to, really post-it note size takeaway? And then if we could do like a little miniature, I know we just did it, but we could do a miniature version on Tech Degenerates and sign out.
So I think the big takeaway that I would like people to know is if you haven't started with Trustmark, they are making it very easy for you to do so. There are, beyond just our call, CompTIA has their own call that they run as well. There's other groups out there that are doing things to enable this. The actual onboarding process for it is very, very smooth and well documented. So, I mean, it's a pretty low entry point fiscally to get involved and get started. And it doesn't mean that you have to, eat the whole elephant right now, but it will at least get you started.
Yeah. So if you're a CompTIA member, it's $250 for the first year, and you do have to be a CompTIA member. But to contrast that with a $15,000 SOC 2 engagement or something like that is. It's a pretty special program. What's happening here, and there's other things that you get access to in the CompTIA membership, right? It's basically the town square of our IT industry. So as much as you guys are creating this community, right, and you've got your nightclub in the industry, we've got the town square is out there, and people get what they give in the CompTIA community as well.
Correct. The other thing that I would say is a takeaway for the Trustmark is that, yes, there's a lot of controls. They're not difficult to do. They're going to take you some time, and you're going to have to really look at your organization and make them fit your organization and document it appropriately, but it will make you better in the long run. So take the time, do it right, make yourself better, and keep on keeping on.
Thanks, Don. And of course, at Fort Mesa, we're here to support service providers building those cybersecurity businesses. We do that with workflows to help you inform your clients on cybersecurity gaps, plan those service delivery engagements, and of course, prove it. Prove the compliance, evidence it. Next week, and I should have this on the tip of my tongue, but I don't. So, give me a moment here. We have creating customer cybersecurity playbooks. And we're going to be meeting with David Son and Dean Trempelis from Helped. They do help desk and IT triage outsourcing, mostly for service providers. So come talk to us about those those great opportunities for formalizing your service playbooks next week. That'll be at 2:30 Eastern time, and of course, like, share, and subscribe to our content on LinkedIn and out on YouTube. Thank you, everyone.